Close your eyes and let the world around you fade into silence. Tonight, we begin a journey, not into noise, nor into the restless pace of the present, but into the soft shadows of forgotten time. There were once maps drawn by trembling hands under the glow of candlelight, maps that carried more than coastlines and rivers. They carried dreams, secrets, and whispers of lands unseen, lands that no compass could truly measure and no ship could ever fully reach. The ancients called them by many names: the kingdoms that vanished, the isles that drifted like smoke, the shores where myths came alive. To trace their outlines was to wander between history and imagination, to step softly into the eternal twilight of memory. Long before satellites traced every corner of our planet, and long before explorers drew coastlines with precision, there existed another kind of world, one sketched in faded ink, filled with imagination, whispers, and forgotten legends. Old maps resting in dusty libraries and monasteries are not merely guides to lands once known. They are windows into the collective dreams and fears of humanity. In the margins of these maps, oceans were alive with monstrous creatures, and forests stretched endlessly, hiding kingdoms that no traveler had ever seen. Some of these kingdoms, such as Atlantis or Thule, became eternal mysteries. Others faded into obscurity, their names remembered only by scholars of the past. These cartographic phantoms, lands marked but never found, formed the first shadows of a forgotten geography, the world of the lost realms. The cartographers of antiquity did not always seek accuracy. They sought meaning. A line on parchment could be both a coastline and a myth. A mountain range could hide treasures or gods. And so the first shadow lands appeared, realities and fictions entwined, shaping the way civilizations imagined their place in the cosmos. This documentary begins its journey here, at the meeting point between reality and myth. We will travel across forgotten maps, tracing the outlines of vanished empires, sunken cities, and every map begins not with ink, but with imagination. In the dim glow of a candle, a cartographer's quill would trace lines that carried both knowledge and speculation. For these early mapmakers, the world was not a finished puzzle. It was a living mystery, with vast oceans uncharted and lands whispered of in rumors. To draw a map was not only to record geography, it was to craft a vision of reality. Merchants returning from distant voyages spoke of islands rising from the mist, lands rich with gold, or kingdoms where people lived in strange and wondrous ways. These stories, passed from sailor to scribe, became lines on parchment. Sometimes they were accurate, often they were not. But in either case, they gave shape to worlds unseen. The dream of the cartographer was therefore half truth, half myth. A coastline could curve into unknown seas. A mountain might mark the edge of the known world. Beyond it, artists filled the space with warnings. Here be dragons. Such warnings were not always meant to frighten. They were symbols of the vast, mysterious power of the unknown. Through these maps, we see how humans once viewed themselves not as masters of the earth, but as wanderers within a fragile bubble of knowledge, surrounded by endless uncertainty. Each inked shadow spoke of possibilities, hidden realms, undiscovered peoples, forgotten kingdoms. The cartographer's dream is the foundation of our journey. For without their blend of fact and legend, the world of lost realms would never have been drawn at all. In the strokes of their pens, we glimpse the first outlines of the first land of shadows. In every ancient map, the heart of the known world lies clear. Familiar cities, harbors, and roads connecting centers of power. But it is the margins, the edges of parchment, where the imagination burns brightest. Here the line between truth and invention dissolves, and the first whispers of lost realms emerge. To the medieval scribe, the edge of the world was not empty space. It was alive with speculation. Strange creatures prowled its borders, serpents curling through oceans, griffins guarding mountains, or spirits dwelling in forests no one dared to enter. These depictions were not careless decorations. They were attempts to give shape to mystery, to explain what lay beyond human reach. In some cases, these marginal lands became so vivid they were treated as real. Sailors carried tales of islands that appeared and vanished with the tides. Scholars debated the existence of continents far across the seas. Empires dreamed of hidden territories filled with resources and wonders. Thus, the margins of the map were not simply boundaries, they were promises. The most haunting of these promises were the shadow realms, places half remembered, half invented, yet drawn with conviction. A dotted coastline here, an unnamed island there, and suddenly a myth found a home in ink. Over centuries, entire civilizations would chase these phantoms, setting sail in search of realms that might never have existed. The margins remind us of the fragile boundary between knowledge and imagination. To explore them is to glimpse the human spirit at its most daring, its most uncertain. The lost kingdoms of history often began here, in the faint strokes at the edge of parchment, in the shadows cast by ink where the known world faded into mystery. The world of ancient maps is haunted by names of kingdoms that hover between legend and memory. These were not purely mythical, nor entirely real. They existed in a twilight state, sustained by stories, rumors, and fragments of forgotten history. One such kingdom was Thule, whispered by Greek and Roman writers as a land at the edge of the northern seas. To some, it was an icy wasteland where the sun barely rose. To others, it was a realm of mystical wisdom, a sanctuary for knowledge hidden far from the known world. Its exact location was never certain. Yet for centuries, Thule appeared on maps, a ghost of geography that refused to vanish. Further east, tales spoke of Cathay, a name given to distant lands that merged real accounts of China with wild imagination. Travelers described cities of endless wealth, rivers of silver, and rulers cloaked in divine authority. To the European mind, Cathay was both a destination and a dream, a place that stretched the boundaries of possibility. Then there were the islands, High Brazil, said to rise from the Atlantic mist once every 7 years, Antillia, the island of 7 cities where exiled bishops had supposedly built a paradise beyond the reach of empires. These islands never rested still. They drifted across maps, shifting in shape and position, as though the cartographers themselves were chasing their shadows. Such kingdoms remind us that the line between legend and memory is fragile. Perhaps they were echoes of real places, distorted by distance and time. Perhaps they were projections of human longing, for riches, for wisdom, for worlds untouched by decay. In the end, they remained suspended between truth and dream, the first great phantoms of the lost realms. To understand the maps of the past, one must learn to read their language, not the written words, but the symbols. Every mark, every creature, every flourish of ink carried meaning beyond geography. These symbols transformed maps from tools into stories, from records into visions. A sea serpent curling along the waves was more than a warning. It was a reminder of the unknown dangers awaiting sailors beyond familiar waters. A compass rose was not merely a guide to direction, but a sign of cosmic order, tying the traveler to the heavens. Mountains were drawn like towers or jagged teeth, not to show exact shape, but to capture their mystery and power. Some symbols carried echoes of religion and myth. Crosses marked sacred lands. Angels hovered near holy cities. Dragons and giants guarded territories too distant to explore. In this symbolic universe, maps became mirrors of belief. The world was not measured in miles, but in meaning. What is striking is how often these symbols gave life to lands that may never have existed. A single sketch of a mysterious island could fix it in the minds of generations. A symbol, once drawn, was difficult to erase, for it carried the authority of the cartographer's hand. Thus, many phantom kingdoms were born not from exploration, but from the power of ink and imagination. The language of symbols reveals a deeper truth. Old maps were never meant to be exact. They were guides for the spirit as much as for the body. They led travelers not only to new shores, but also into the heart of myth. In their symbols, we hear the voices of an age that believed the world was vast, enchanted, and full of shadows yet to be unveiled. For ancient sailors, the sea was both a path and a barrier. It carried the promise of discovery, yet it also concealed realms that seemed to belong more to dreams than to the earth. On old maps, vast oceans stretched endlessly, and within their blue ink floated islands that flickered between existence and illusion. One of the most enduring of these was High Brazil, said to appear off the coast of Ireland. Legends claimed it was cloaked in mist, visible only once every 7 years. Some sailors swore they had seen its outline, golden in the setting sun, only for it to vanish as they approached. For centuries, High Brazil was drawn on maps as if it were real, a shadow island forever beyond reach. Another phantom was Antillia, the island of 7 cities. Medieval cartographers placed it in the Atlantic, a refuge where exiled bishops had supposedly built shining cities of stone. It was thought to be a place of abundance, safety, and light, an imagined counterpart to the troubled world of Europe. Antillia drifted across maps, sometimes closer to Africa, sometimes near the Americas, always just out of grasp. The oceans became a stage where myth and geography intertwined. Each wave held the possibility of wonder, each horizon the chance of finding an undiscovered shore. But with every voyage that failed to find these lands, the shadows grew deeper. Still, they were never erased. Instead, they lingered, reminding sailors that the world was larger than their knowledge, richer than their certainty. These shadow islands symbolize more than false geography. They embody humanity's longing, the hope that just beyond the horizon there is something greater, untouched. No lost realm has captured the human imagination more than Atlantis. First described by the philosopher Plato in the 4th century BCE, Atlantis was said to be a mighty island civilization, rich in power and knowledge, that vanished beneath the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. Plato's tale was not presented as mere fiction. It was framed as history, a story passed down from ancient priests of Egypt to the Greeks. The city was described as a marvel of order and design, with concentric rings of land and water, palaces gleaming with wealth, and a society that rose to greatness before falling into arrogance. Its destruction, he suggested, was divine punishment, a warning against pride. Over time, Atlantis became more than a philosophical allegory. It became a symbol of longing. Explorers, scholars, and dreamers searched for its ruins in the Mediterranean, in the Atlantic, and even across distant oceans. Each generation reshaped the myth to fit its vision, the utopia of wisdom, a cautionary tale of hubris, or a lost cradle of civilization. Its enduring power lies not in evidence, but in possibility. Atlantis reminds us that beneath the waves, or beyond the edge of knowledge, entire worlds might wait, hidden from our grasp. To this day, the name evokes mystery, grandeur, and the deep human desire to recover what has been lost.
For as long as humans have looked eastward, there have been stories of realms beyond the sunrise, lands untouched by known empires, shimmering with wealth and mystery. Ancient maps often stretched into these imagined territories, drawing continents that blurred fact with fable. Among the most persistent of these was the idea of Cipangu, known today as Japan. Medieval travelers described it as a golden kingdom where palaces were roofed with precious metal and treasures lay abundant in every corner. By the time Marco Polo carried these tales to Europe, Cipangu had become a beacon of desire, its wealth exaggerated with every retelling. On maps, it appeared as a glowing island, sometimes larger than reality, sometimes drifting like a mirage in the wide Pacific. But Cipangu was not alone. There were whispers of Isles of the Blessed, eternal lands lying far to the east, where heroes and saints found rest. These were not marked as ordinary places, but as spiritual realms, where geography and faith merged. For sailors, they were both a destination and a promise, an earthly paradise waiting just beyond reach. The East was also home to imagined kingdoms of strange customs, people with faces in their chests, or nations where the sun never set. These depictions were not simple inventions, they reflected the fascination with what lay beyond the edges of familiar trade routes. Each tale hinted at the possibility that the world was larger, stranger, and more wondrous than anyone had yet seen. Lands beyond the sunrise remind us that exploration was never only about territory. It was about hope, the hope that somewhere beyond the horizon.
Few legends burned as brightly on medieval maps as the tale of Prester John, a mysterious Christian king said to rule a vast and hidden empire at the edges of the world. His kingdom was described as a land of immense wealth and wonder, filled with rivers of jewels, towering palaces, and people who lived in harmony under his benevolent rule. The myth began in the 12th century, when letters circulated across Europe claiming to be from Prester John himself. These letters spoke of a realm beyond the Islamic world, a Christian kingdom that would one day ally with Europe in its struggles. For some, it was said to lie in India, for others, in the heart of Africa. Wherever it was imagined, its presence ignited hope. Cartographers eagerly placed Prester John's realm on their maps, shifting its location from one continent to another as stories evolved. Sometimes it was drawn near the legendary lands of the East, close to Cathay. Other times it appeared deep within Ethiopia, hidden behind mountains and deserts. Each new map breathed fresh life into the legend, giving form to an empire that no traveler could confirm. The kingdom of Prester John was not merely a cartographic mistake. It was a reflection of yearning, Europe's desire for allies, for miracles, for proof that faith stretched beyond familiar borders. His imagined empire became a bridge between geography and prophecy, hope and history. Though no expedition ever found Prester John, his kingdom endured for centuries in the margins of maps. It remains a reminder that sometimes the most powerful realms are not those that exist in stone and soil, but those that live in the collective imagination, etched in ink, guarded in legend, and whispered across time.
On the faded edges of countless maps appears a phrase both simple and haunting: terra incognita, the unknown land. It was not the name of a kingdom, nor the trace of a rumor, but a declaration of mystery. Wherever knowledge ended, cartographers wrote these words, filling the blank with possibility. For the ancient mind, emptiness was unacceptable. A blank space could not remain silent. It had to be explained, populated, or imagined. And so terra incognita became the canvas for the human spirit. Some maps filled it with vast deserts stretching into infinity. Others adorned it with monstrous beasts, signaling danger. Still others dared to suggest hidden empires, fertile and rich, waiting just beyond discovery. In the Renaissance, terra incognita often appeared on maps of the southern hemisphere. Scholars believed a great continent must exist to balance the known lands of the north. This unseen realm was called Terra Australis, a continent imagined long before Australia was truly charted. For centuries, it appeared on maps, vast and imposing, proof of the human need to impose order on uncertainty. Yet terra incognita was more than geography. It was a symbol of the human condition. Each generation has its own unknown lands, mysteries waiting to be explored. For sailors of the past, it was the horizon. For us, it may be the depths of the ocean, the edges of the cosmos, or the secrets buried in history. The phrase carries a quiet power. It acknowledges what we do not know, while also inviting us to dream. Terra incognita was never just a label of ignorance. It was a challenge. It whispered to explorers and dreamers alike, "Here lies the next great story." Among the most persistent mysteries on old maps are the Phantom Isles. Islands drawn with confidence, named with care, yet never truly found. These were not fleeting mistakes, quickly corrected, but enduring presences that haunted charts for centuries. One of the most famous was St. Brendan's Isle, said to have been discovered by the Irish monk Brendan during his legendary voyage in the 6th century. Tales spoke of a lush paradise, a place of divine blessing hidden somewhere in the Atlantic. For generations, sailors searched for it, claiming to see its shores appear on the horizon only to dissolve into mist. It was drawn and redrawn across maps, wandering restlessly across the ocean. Another phantom was Friesland, which appeared on maps of the North Atlantic from the 16th century onward. Larger than Iceland, it was depicted with towns, harbors, and mountains, as though thoroughly explored, yet no trace of it exists. Some scholars believe it was a cartographic error magnified by repetition. Others suggest it may have been a fleeting glimpse of Greenland, misremembered and misplaced. Still, Friesland remained, a stubborn ghost of geography. The Phantom Isles remind us of how fragile truth was in an age before precise instruments. A sailor's mistaken sighting, a rumor carried by merchants, or even a smudge of ink could give birth to a new world. Once named and mapped, an island was difficult to erase. For erasing meant admitting uncertainty. These islands, though absent in reality, became very real in the minds of those who sought them. They lured explorers, inspired legends, and shaped the way people imagined the oceans. The Phantom Isles show us that sometimes what does not exist. For centuries, Africa was a land of mystery on European maps. Its northern coasts were well known, the bustling ports of the Mediterranean, the golden cities of Carthage, the rich Nile Delta. But beyond the Sahara, cartographers painted a world of shadows, blending fragments of truth with sweeping imagination. One of the most enduring legends was the Mountains of the Moon, said to be the source of the Nile. Ancient geographers described them as snow-capped peaks hidden deep in the heart of the continent, feeding great rivers that flowed northward. Though no explorer confirmed their existence, they appeared again and again on maps, symbols of the unreachable heart of Africa. Equally captivating was the belief in powerful kingdoms beyond the desert. The Empire of Mali, with its fabled wealth in gold, grew into near mythical proportions in European imagination. Tales of Mansa Musa, the emperor who crossed the Sahara with caravans of unimaginable riches, gave rise to stories of hidden cities where streets glittered with treasure. Yet alongside real empires, Africa's maps were filled with fantasy. Strange creatures, half human, half beast, lurked near the edges. Rivers twisted impossibly across deserts. Kingdoms were drawn where none existed, placed there by rumor or desire. Most famously, the mythical realm of Prester John was, at times, relocated here, imagined as a Christian empire hidden among the mountains of Ethiopia. The edge of Africa on these maps was never a void. It was a canvas for longing, for gold, for knowledge, for the discovery of allies and marvels. In time, explorers would uncover the continent's true breadth and depth. But in the age of shadows, if Africa was a land of gold and mystery, then Asia was imagined as the realm of endless wonders. On medieval maps, it stretched vast and unknowable, its borders dissolving into myth. Here, kingdoms both real and fantastical were drawn side by side, each one shaped as much by rumor as by geography. The fabled empire of the Great Khan dominated many maps, fueled by tales of Mongol power and wealth. Yet alongside it appeared stranger realms, kingdoms of people with dog-like heads, or lands where men had only one enormous foot, which they used as a shield against the sun. These were not idle inventions, but echoes of ancient travelers' stories, distorted, exaggerated, and passed down through generations. One of the most persistent legends was that of the kingdom of Gog and Magog. These lands, supposedly sealed behind massive walls by Alexander the Great, were said to harbor tribes of chaos, savage nations that would one day be unleashed upon the world. On maps, Gog and Magog often appeared at the very edges of Asia, reminders of both fear and prophecy. Equally mysterious was the shifting location of Prester John's realm, sometimes placed in India, sometimes in Central Asia. Cartographers clung to the hope of a Christian ally hidden in the east, marking his kingdom with crosses and radiant cities. Asia in these maps was less a continent than a tapestry of belief. It was a place where faith, fear, and wonder merged into geography. The further east the eye traveled, the less certain the lines became, until kingdoms dissolved into shadows. The secret kingdoms of Asia remind us that maps are the far north, a land of ice and shadow, has always stirred the imagination. On ancient maps, it was drawn not as an empty wilderness, but as a place of secrets, where the natural and the mythical blurred together in the glow of the aurora. One of the most enduring legends was Ultima Thule. First mentioned by Greek explorers, Thule was believed to lie at the very edge of the world, 6 days' sail north of Britain. Some described it as a frozen wasteland where the sun barely rose, while others envisioned it as a land of wisdom and strange beauty. For centuries, cartographers placed Thule on their maps, shifting it across the North Atlantic and Arctic as if chasing a moving shadow. Other maps spoke of the Hyperboreans, a people said to live in a paradise beyond the north wind. Their land was imagined as fertile, warmed by eternal sunlight, a mirror image of the icy Arctic that surrounded it. Here, humans were thought to live for centuries in harmony with gods and nature alike. The northern seas also gave birth to phantom islands, floating lands that appeared and disappeared amid the fog. Some maps depicted a giant whirlpool at the North Pole, pulling ships into the Earth itself. Others drew a magnetic mountain, said to control compasses and the very tides of the sea. The northern mysteries reflected humanity's fear and awe of the unknown. The further north one traveled, the stranger the world became, until reality dissolved into dream. Even today, the Arctic retains its aura of mystery, a realm of silence where shadows stretch long and the horizon seems endless. In the imagination of the past, the North was never empty. It was the threshold of the impossible, the edge where the known world faded into legend.
Long before explorers reached the icy shores of Antarctica, maps were already filled with visions of a vast southern land. This imagined realm, known as Terra Australis Incognita, was drawn not because it had been seen, but because it was believed the world required it. Scholars argued that a great continent must exist in the south to balance the known lands of the north. Cartographers shaded it in boldly, sweeping coastlines that stretched across the bottom of maps, immense and mysterious. Sometimes it was depicted as fertile, filled with rivers and cities. At other times, it appeared as a barren wilderness, home to strange beasts and unknown peoples. Though entirely speculative, it became one of the most persistent phantoms in cartographic history. The southern continent appeared everywhere, from the maps of Ptolemy in antiquity to Renaissance globes adorned with fantastical illustrations. Explorers returning from the Indian Ocean or the Pacific often added fuel to the legend, claiming glimpses of land in the mist or islands that hinted at a greater whole. Each fragment, whether true or false, gave the imagined continent new life. For centuries, Terra Australis was a dream of power. Empires imagined vast riches, new trade routes, and undiscovered civilizations waiting to be claimed. Yet as voyages pushed further south, the great continent receded into myth. When Antarctica was finally sighted in the 19th century, it was not the fertile land of imagination, but a frozen desert, silent and inhospitable. Still, the southern continent holds meaning beyond its reality. It represents the way humans fill the unknown with hope and fear, turning absence into story. Terra Australis may never have existed, as few legends gleamed as brightly on old maps as the dream of a city made entirely of gold. Known as El Dorado, it began as a story whispered by explorers in South America. At first, it was not a city, but a man, a king who covered himself in gold dust and bathed in a sacred lake as part of a ritual. Over time, the tale transformed. The man became a kingdom, then a city, and finally an empire hidden deep within the jungles. Cartographers seized upon the legend. They filled the uncharted interior of South America with golden cities, Manoa by the shores of Lake Parim, or a glittering metropolis hidden in the Andes. Each new map offered a different location, moving the city further into the unknown as explorers failed to find it. The myth spread so widely that entire expeditions vanished, chasing its promise. El Dorado was more than a place. It was a reflection of desire. To Europeans, it symbolized limitless wealth, the possibility of fortunes waiting just beyond reach. To local peoples, it carried echoes of sacred rituals, misunderstood and reshaped by foreign imagination. On maps, the city became a beacon, pulling travelers deeper into the heart of lands they barely understood. Yet the Golden City was never found. The jungles yielded no streets of gold, no shining palaces. What remained instead were stories, maps marked with phantom cities, rivers traced toward impossible destinations, and ruins mistaken for the gates of the lost realm. El Dorado endures as a symbol of the Shadowlands, a dream too radiant to fade, too elusive to prove. It reminds us that the greatest treasures on maps are not always in the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Cartographers filled the emptiness with islands that never existed. These phantom islands appeared again and again on maps for centuries, shifting positions yet refusing to disappear. They were born from misread journeys, sailors' tales, and the lingering desire to make the unknown more familiar. One of the most famous was St. Brendan's Island, said to have been discovered by the Irish monk Brendan in the 6th century during his legendary voyage across the sea. Later maps placed this island west of Africa, then near the Azores, and sometimes in the middle of the ocean. Sailors swore they saw its green hills rise above the horizon, only for the land to vanish as they approached. Another phantom was the island of High Brazil, a mist-shrouded paradise said to lie off the coast of Ireland. Legends claimed it appeared only once every 7 years, glowing like a jewel on the water before sinking again beneath the waves. On medieval charts, High Brazil was drawn with intricate detail, as though it had been visited and measured, yet no voyage ever proved its existence. Maps also carried the mysterious Isle of Demons, often placed near Newfoundland, where travelers were tormented by spirits and monstrous creatures. It embodied the fears of early explorers, giving form to the dangers of the sea. Over time, as navigation improved, these phantom islands began to vanish from maps, yet their stories lingered, inspiring explorers, poets, and dreamers. They remind us that old maps were not just tools of geography. They were canvases of imagination, where myths shared space with coastlines. For centuries, maps carried a vast landmass across the southern edge of the world. Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. Long before the actual discovery of Australia or Antarctica, scholars and cartographers were convinced that such a continent must exist. It was not a matter of speculation, but of balance. According to ancient Greek geography, the Earth required harmony. Land in the northern hemisphere must be counterweighted by land in the south. Without it, the globe would not remain in equilibrium. This reasoning, combined with fragmented sailors' tales, led to the creation of a phantom continent, sprawling across the southern seas.
Renaissance maps often showed Terra Australis as an immense, fertile land filled with mountains, rivers, and thriving cities. Artists decorated it with imagined animals, giant birds, strange beasts, and sometimes even unicorns. Some charts labeled it a potential paradise, waiting to be discovered. Others feared it was a land of monsters, lying at the very edge of human reach. The myth of Terra Australis fueled countless voyages. European explorers sailed south in search of this hidden land, believing it might hold riches or civilizations as grand as those of Asia. When navigators reached Australia in the 17th century, many assumed it was part of this vast southern continent. Even Antarctica, when first glimpsed, was thought to confirm.
Throughout medieval and Renaissance maps, the Atlantic Ocean was never portrayed as empty. Instead, it was crowded with islands, some real, some imagined, and many forever lost to time. Among these phantom isles were places like St. Brendan's Isle, Antillia, and the Isle of Brazil. Each carried its own legend, woven from myth, sailors' tales, and cartographic embellishment. St. Brendan's Isle originated from the voyage of an Irish monk, St. Brendan the Navigator, who was said to have sailed across the western seas in the 6th century. His journey described wondrous islands where giant birds sang hymns and seas burst into flames. For centuries, maps marked a mysterious isle west of Ireland, shifting its position with each edition as if it floated across the horizon. Antillia, sometimes called the Island of the Seven Cities, appeared on maps in the 15th century. Legend claimed it was settled by 7 bishops who fled Iberia during the Muslim conquest, establishing a utopia across the ocean. Portuguese sailors searched for it endlessly, convinced it might be within reach. Then came the Isle of Brazil, not to be confused with modern Brazil, said to lie west of Ireland and visible once every 7 years through the mist. Maps portrayed it as a perfect circle, glowing faintly on the horizon. Mariners swore they saw it, only to find open sea when they approached. These phantom isles were not mere curiosities, they guided navigation. Explorers sailed with hope of reaching them, financing journeys on the promise of discovery. Even after the New World was charted, echoes of these lost islands lingered, haunting maps for centuries. In truth, they were products of longing, projections of human imagination onto the uncharted ocean. But in shaping routes and inspiring voyages, they became as real as any land ever. In the heart of Africa, beyond the reach of Mediterranean explorers, lay legends of mountains that fed the greatest river in the world. Known as the Mountains of the Moon, these peaks were said to give birth to the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt and the cradle of civilizations. Ancient geographers, including Ptolemy, recorded these mountains with precision that blended observation and imagination. Travelers spoke of snow-capped summits rising from the tropics, surrounded by jungles and deserts inhabited by unknown peoples and wild beasts. The mountains became a symbol of the unexplored interior, a place of both wonder and danger. Over the centuries, maps depicted these peaks as jagged, imposing forms, often labeled lunae montes. Their rivers branched into great streams, feeding the Nile and creating a network of life in a land largely mysterious to Europeans. Even when explorers ventured deep into the continent, the true source of the Nile remained elusive for centuries, allowing the myth of the Mountains of the Moon to persist. The legend also reflects humanity's urge to understand the world through stories. Mountains became more than geography. They were repositories of hope and knowledge,
guiding explorers on quests of discovery. Scholars debated their existence, blending astronomy, hydrology, and myth into theories that persisted well into the Renaissance. These mountains remind us that maps were not just about recording land. They were a narrative of curiosity. The mountains of the moon, real or imagined, symbolize the boundary between the known and the unknown. They were the first steps into the hidden heart of Africa, a land of shadows and secrets waiting to be unveiled.
Deserts have always been places of mystery, where reality and imagination meet in shifting sands. On ancient maps, the great deserts of Africa, Arabia, and Central Asia were more than barren lands. They were the stage for lost kingdoms, hidden cities, and forgotten civilizations. The Sahara, for example, was depicted as a vast expanse dotted with oases, mountains, and phantom rivers. Beyond its dunes, cartographers placed empires and cities that were often rumored but rarely seen. The kingdom of Zabir, or the legendary City of the Sun, was imagined as a prosperous desert realm, rich in gold and knowledge, waiting for intrepid explorers to uncover it. Arabian deserts also inspired myths. Ancient maps sometimes marked cities of immense wealth hidden behind shifting dunes, where merchants of rare spices, pearls, and treasures conducted secret trade. Tales of Sheba, the fabled queen, and her golden city traveled across continents, inspiring maps that blended myth with trade routes. Central Asia's deserts, stretching from the Caspian to the Gobi, were likewise dotted with phantom oases and fortified kingdoms. Cartographers relied on travelers' accounts, which were often exaggerated or misunderstood, creating a tapestry of shadowed realms that existed between truth and imagination. These desert kingdoms served a dual purpose. They marked the limits of knowledge while encouraging exploration. Maps were not only tools, they were invitations. They beckoned adventurers to venture into the unknown, promising riches, wisdom, and stories that would endure for centuries. The lost kingdoms of the desert remind us that humans have always projected their hopes onto uncharted.
High in the mountains of Asia, where snow meets sky, ancient maps hinted at valleys hidden from ordinary sight, lands untouched by the outside world, where kingdoms and cultures thrived in secrecy. These hidden valleys of the Himalayas were often shrouded in mystery, their existence suggested by travelers' tales rather than direct observation. Legends spoke of kingdoms ruled by wise kings or enlightened sages, where people lived long, harmonious lives in villages tucked between peaks. The valleys were imagined as fertile and abundant, nourished by glacial rivers and sheltered from the harsh winds of the high mountains. On maps, they appeared as tiny pockets of civilization amidst the jagged terrain, marked with symbols of mystery and reverence. The idea of hidden Himalayan kingdoms merged myth with geography. Stories of Shambhala, a utopian realm where spiritual wisdom reigned, circulated widely. While explorers sought physical evidence, monks and scholars preserved these tales as allegories of inner journeys, mapping the spiritual landscape alongside the physical. Rivers, mountain passes, and peaks became more than topographical features. They were pathways into the unknown. Cartographers often drew exaggerated mountains or mysterious rivers to signify the difficulty of accessing these regions, reminding travelers that the Himalayas were both dangerous and sacred. The hidden valleys of the Himalayas remind us that maps were not only practical, they were visionary. They captured what might be real and what was imagined, blending tangible terrain with human longing for discovery. Even today, the idea of hidden kingdoms inspires awe, symbolizing the eternal allure of the vast Pacific Ocean, with its countless islands, has long been a canvas for both discovery and imagination. Long before accurate charts existed, cartographers filled the ocean with forgotten isles, lands glimpsed once, heard of in rumor, or born entirely from imagination. Among these phantom islands were places like Los Jardines, a lush paradise said to appear in sailors' tales of the 16th century. Some maps depicted them as fertile lands with rivers, forests, and small villages, glowing with potential wealth. Explorers seeking these isles often returned empty-handed, yet the maps persisted, guiding subsequent voyages. Other islands, such as Rica de Oro and Pepe's Island, drifted across charts, changing position from one map to another. Some were mistakenly created from sightings of atolls or misidentified coastlines. Others were inventions of hopeful mapmakers catering to patrons seeking new trade routes and riches. The Pacific's forgotten isles were also home to myths of the supernatural. Maps sometimes noted islands inhabited by giant birds, invisible spirits, or tribes with extraordinary powers. These annotations reflected the interplay of reality and imagination, a reminder that early cartography was as much storytelling as measurement. Even as navigation improved and many of these islands were proven non-existent, the legacy remained. They influenced exploration, inspired literature, and left traces in the minds of those who sought to chart the unknown. The forgotten isles of the Pacific reveal a crucial truth. The maps of old were not just geographical records, they were dreams etched in ink. They captured the hope, fear, and for centuries, maps carried a mysterious label across their lower edges: Terra Incognita Australis, the unknown southern land. This vast imagined continent stretched like a ghostly shadow across the unexplored south, balancing the known continents in the minds of ancient and medieval scholars. The idea of Terra Australis was rooted in philosophy as much as geography. Thinkers such as Aristotle and later Ptolemy argued that the Earth must be balanced. If there were large continents in the north, then surely there must be land in the far south. Cartographers carried this concept forward, shading great expanses of parchment with sweeping outlines of an unseen world. Renaissance maps often depicted Terra Australis as a place of mystery and abundance. Some suggested it was a land rich in gold and spices, waiting for discovery. Others imagined strange creatures dwelling there, half human, half beast, shaped by the extremes of climate and isolation. The southern continent became a blank canvas upon which explorers projected both fear and desire. When navigators like Ferdinand Magellan and James Cook ventured southward, they began to chip away at this phantom land. Cook's voyages in the 18th century, particularly around Australia and the South Pacific, revealed that much of Terra Australis was illusion. Yet the myth persisted until the icy shores of Antarctica were finally glimpsed in the 19th century. The story of Terra Incognita reminds us of how powerfully belief can shape the maps we draw. For centuries, the idea of balance and symmetry outweighed the evidence of empty seas. The imagined southern continent was less a geographic reality than a reflection of human longing, our need to believe that the world still held wonders beyond our sight. Among the strangest features of old maps are the so-called phantom islands, lands that appeared for centuries, only to vanish once navigators sailed in search of them. These ghostly coastlines remind us that maps were never static. They were living documents, shaped by rumor, error, and imagination. One of the most famous was High Brazil, said to lie west of Ireland. For generations, sailors spoke of glimpsing it through mists, an island of beauty shining like glass. On medieval maps, High Brazil appeared as a perfect circle, tempting explorers who searched but never found its shores. The mystery endured well into the 17th century, despite repeated failures to locate it. Another was St. Brendan's Island, named after the legendary voyage of the Irish monk Brendan. According to stories, he and his companions reached a wondrous island far across the Atlantic. Mapmakers, uncertain of its location, placed it in shifting positions, from near the Azores to the middle of the ocean. Its elusive nature made it both a hope for explorers and a torment for cartographers. Even into the modern age, phantom islands lingered. Sandy Island, for example, was charted in the Coral Sea and appeared on maps as late as the 21st century, until scientists confirmed it did not exist. Such cases reveal how even in an age of satellites, echoes of old myths can survive. These vanishing lands speak to a deeper truth. The human mind abhors emptiness. Seas without islands seemed incomplete, so stories and sightings filled the void. Phantom islands were not merely mistakes, they were symbols of possibility, reminders that the horizon might still conceal something wondrous.
For centuries, cartographers believed in the existence of a vast southern land, Terra Australis Incognita, or the unknown southern land. It appeared on maps as a massive continent stretching across the bottom of the world, balancing the known lands of the north. Though entirely speculative, its imagined presence influenced exploration, politics, and the very way humanity pictured the Earth. The roots of Terra Australis lay in classical thought. Greek philosophers like Ptolemy argued that the Earth must be symmetrical. If there were great continents in the north, then there must be an equally immense landmass in the Atlantic Ocean, vast and restless, became a canvas for cartographers and sailors alike. Scattered across its maps for centuries were islands that never truly existed, phantom islands. They were born from sailors' tales, fleeting sightings, and the human tendency to fill the unknown with possibility. Among the most famous was St. Brendan's Isle, named after the Irish monk who supposedly voyaged across the ocean in the 6th century. Medieval accounts claimed he discovered a lush island filled with fruit, birds, and divine wonders. For centuries, mapmakers placed St. Brendan's Isle in different corners of the Atlantic, though no expedition ever found it. Another phantom was Antillia, sometimes called the Isle of Seven Cities. Legend told of 7 bishops who fled the Muslim conquest of Iberia, sailing west to found a utopian kingdom. Maps from the 15th century often depicted Antillia as a large rectangular island positioned somewhere between Spain and the New World. Its story blended myth with hope, an island of refuge untouched by war. Equally mysterious was Friesland, a supposed island near Greenland. It appeared on maps of the 16th and 17th centuries, often detailed with mountains, harbors, and towns. Yet as voyages through the North Atlantic increased, Friesland failed to materialize, eventually fading from maps as silently as it had appeared. These phantom islands revealed the fragile line between observation and imagination. A dark cloud on the horizon, a mirage, or even a miscalculated coordinate could give birth to a new land on parchment. And once an island was drawn, it often lingered for generations, guiding explorers toward empty seas. In these vanished places, we see how myth sustained exploration. Each phantom island carried with it a promise, a sanctuary, a kingdom, or a paradise forever just beyond reach. For centuries, scholars and explorers believed that the Earth must be balanced. If there were great continents in the north, there had to be an equally vast landmass in the south. Thus was born the enduring legend of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. Medieval maps often displayed this enormous continent stretching across the bottom of the world, its edges sketched with mountains, forests, and sometimes golden cities. It was less an observation than a philosophical assumption. The Earth, they reasoned, could not be stable without southern lands to counterbalance the weight of the north. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the dream of Terra Australis grew stronger. Explorers from Spain, Portugal, and later the Dutch all reported glimpses of southern coasts, sometimes real, sometimes imagined. Each new voyage added fragments of coastline to maps, creating an image of a sprawling continent that seemed almost within reach. One of the most persistent beliefs was that Terra Australis was not only real, but also rich in resources. Some maps depicted it as a golden land, fertile and teeming with wealth. To European powers, it was the ultimate prize, an untouched continent awaiting conquest. Ironically, parts of this mythical continent were based on actual lands. Early sightings of Australia, New Zealand, and even Antarctic icebergs were woven into the legend, reinforcing the belief that Terra Australis stretched endlessly southward. Yet, when navigators like James Cook ventured deep into the Pacific in the 18th century, the dream began to unravel. They found real southern lands, but none as vast or wondrous as the continent of imagination. Still, Terra Australis endures on ancient maps as a reminder of humanity's need to balance fact with vision, reality with myth. A southern land that was both everywhere and nowhere.
Few myths have captured the human imagination as powerfully as Atlantis. First described by the philosopher Plato in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, the city was said to be a mighty island empire, rich in culture and power, that sank beneath the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Whether Plato intended it as allegory or history has been debated for centuries, but the allure of Atlantis remains undiminished. Medieval and Renaissance maps occasionally placed Atlantis, or lands thought to resemble it, far out in the Atlantic Ocean. Sometimes it appeared as a small archipelago, other times as a massive island larger than any known continent. Explorers crossing the ocean often carried these maps, wondering if they might stumble upon the ruins of the lost civilization. Theories about Atlantis grew with time. Some imagined it as a paradise of perfect harmony, a model of wisdom and prosperity destroyed by human arrogance. Others saw it as a cautionary tale, warning of the dangers of overreaching ambition. In the age of exploration, however, many came to believe that Atlantis was not myth at all, but history waiting to be rediscovered. Legends tied Atlantis to various real places. The Canary Islands, the Azores, even parts of the Americas were thought to be remnants of the Great Sunken City. Ancient ruins discovered in the New World only deepened the conviction that Plato's story had a factual foundation. While modern science offers no evidence for Atlantis, the myth continues to thrive because it embodies the tension between memory and imagination, fact and dream. It represents not just a lost city, but the eternal human longing for a golden age, a place where wisdom and wonder once flourished, and may yet be found again beneath the waves.
As we reach the final chapter of this journey through lost kingdoms and shadowed lands, one truth becomes clear. Maps are more than tools of navigation. They are mirrors of the human spirit, reflecting not only the terrain we have conquered, but the worlds we have imagined, feared, and longed for. From the shadowy outlines of phantom islands to the golden splendor of El Dorado, from the storm-haunted seas of the Terra Incognita to the glimmering myths of Atlantis, maps have guided both our steps and our dreams. They remind us that exploration is not only about reaching new shores, but also about embracing mystery, uncertainty, and the infinite possibilities of the unknown. Ancient cartographers may have etched dragons, sea monsters, and uncharted empires onto parchment, but what they truly mapped was the boundless scope of human imagination. Every coastline drawn in ink carried whispers of wonder. Every empty space left blank invited new stories to be told. In this way, the maps of the past were not wrong, they were alive, shaped by legend, faith, and hope. Today, satellites and digital charts have filled in most of the blanks, yet the spirit of discovery remains unquenched. The first land of shadows is not just a place that existed on old maps. It is a symbol of how we, as humans, forever seek what lies beyond the horizon. There will always be new mysteries, whether deep beneath the oceans, high among the stars, or within the uncharted territories of the human heart. And so, the map is never finished. Each generation redraws its borders, adds its dreams, and leaves new trails for those who come after. The land of shadows endures, not on paper, but in the eternal quest for meaning, adventure, and wonder.
And so, our journey through the veils of forgotten maps comes to rest. We have walked through shadows and whispers, wandered among kingdoms that once existed only in memory, and touched the silence of lands lost to time. But remember, this is only the beginning. There are always more stories hidden beyond the edges of the map, waiting for those who dare to look closer. If you have found calm in these echoes of the past, let your support be the compass that guides us further. A gentle click, a quiet share, a simple word left behind. Each one lights a lantern for the journeys still to come. So, as you drift into sleep, know that the story will continue, and when you awaken, more paths, more kingdoms, and more mysteries will await. Until then, rest well, traveler of shadows, and thank you for being part of this voyage.